and welcome. This is going to be a lore reading to see what we've learned by going through Leliana's song. Codex, what do we got? Brontos, only two things a noble step aside for: Emperons and angry Brontos. Sulking Beast was originally bred by the Dwarf Shaper to be beast of burden food source, the rough equivalent of a surface oxen and cows. But an ox is a draft animal. It's basically a steer which has been trained to do labor. So, okay, like cows, some versions of Brontos have been more developed as dwarven mounts. Interesting, valued far more for their surefootedness and stamina than for their speed. Well, present within Orzammar in large numbers, some Brontos still exist in packs within deep roads. What do they eat? Having returned to a wild state after the fall of the Dwarven Kingdoms. Kind of like horses in the Americas. That's kind of an interesting thing with their evolution, as I understand. They first evolved in the Americas, then moved into Asia. The American horses, or possibly their ancestors, went extinct. I think they were domesticated in Asia, and then got reintroduced to the Americas from Europe. But anyway, they require remarkable little sustenance, consuming organic material from water, fungus, and even rocks, hence rock liquor appellation used by many dwarves to describe Brontos, and existing in a primarily dormant state until provoked. An angry charging Bronto is considered to be a rather dangerous opponent. Deep Stalker, a fool trusts his eyes, a wise man fears every rock is a deep stalker. Possibly the strangest of all creatures found in the deep roads, a deep stalker, Tezpadam, as the dwarves call them, hunt in packs, generally by burrowing underground and striking when their prey is in their midst. Stalkers come in several types. Spitters have venom glands and can spit secretions that slow or injure their prey. Jumpers hurl themselves at the targets, knocking them down and making them easier to kill. The most common variety scares its prey, leaving the unfortunate victim helpless against the rest of the pack. Golem, once a crucial part of Orzammar's defenses, golems have all but vanished as the secret to their manufacture was lost over 1,000 years ago. What few golems remain are closely guarded by the Shaper, brought out in battle with their darkspawn crews desperate enough to risk their loss. No one would sell a golem for any price, but in ancient times, dwarves sold many golems to the magic lords of Tevinter. They are devastating weapons of war, living siege engines capable of hurling boulders like a catapult or plowing through enemy lines like an earthquake. I don't think earthquakes plowed through enemy lines, but okay. And given the number that I've killed so far playing this game, that's kind of wild. And also, given what we know about how golems are formed, basically you have to sacrifice a living thinking being. One, it's basically blood magic. You basically attach their soul to the golem in order to animate it. Selling them, well, creation of them seems rather morally dubious if they're not volunteers, and selling them, yeah, not good anyway. Mabari Warhound. Dogs are an essential part of Ferelden culture, and no dog is more prized than the Mabari. The breed is as old as myth, said to have been bred from the wolves who served Dane. Prized for their intelligence and loyalty, these dogs are more than mere weapons or status symbols. The hounds choose their masters and pair with them for life. To be the master of a Mabari anywhere in Ferelden is to be recognized instantly as a person of worth. The Mabari are an essential part of Ferelden military strategy. Trained hounds can easily pull knights from horseback or break lines of pikemen. And the sight and sound of a wave of war dogs howling and snarling has been known to cause panic among the most hardened infantry soldiers. I heard something about, like, the Spanish brought war dogs to the Americas, and they apparently were rather effective because the Americas never used dogs in war at that point. But yeah, I do kind of question as to how effective dogs actually were or could be in like group combat, and particularly against Darkspawn. As I think I probably mentioned in like the first, well, that battle at Asgard. Kind of seems like, okay, you have a thing where ingesting their blood is a bad thing, and you have dogs where the primary way of attacking things is biting them. This seems like a bad idea. Controls, okay. Don't really care about any of this. What else? More. Quest related. What do we have? Raiding the Collective. I remember the note from the Mages Collective said there were clues around the market that would point to a hidden cache. At the time, I didn't care someone else had earned that money, or that someone else in French Collective finding clues would be adventure, distraction. I even looked forward to the inevitable guard. By his signature, Severin was the poor fellow's name. I remember Marshallin had given me clippings from the Ferelden books. A social dissection of Orlais, or some such. Orlais presents a veneer of opulence, but the aristocracy are committed to a system of social one-upmanship they call the game. Sprawling receptions delight friend and foe, while bards strike from the shadows with insinuation, larceny, and assassination, often to the strange delight of their targets. Control these auteur agents is yet another layer of the game. Auteur agents I liked. This could not be more dry. Ferelden truly do not understand my world, and that, of course, was Marjolaine's intent. I had arranged my favorite associates, and followed her to Denerim, not for the promise of money, but for the excitement of toying with fools. I was her creature. The Jarl's estate, I remember, like many of Sherry's little surprises, I was more excited than afraid. The Jarl's estate was typical posturing of a fortress in peacetime, its ramparts meant to appease nobility, not defend soldiers. It may have been fearsome long before, but at the moment it was just another prize I longed to humble for Marjolaine. I would come to learn that the Arls the estate had been left in far more troubling hands. The Hard Line, I remember the soldiers called their group the Hard Line. It was not unearned. They were freeholders sworn to one Harwin Riley, a noble who had distinguished himself during the Orlais-Ferelden conflict, but they ended the war in disgrace, and their patron was even denied the return of his title and land. I knew nothing of this at the time. I would come to regret it later. Advised, I had my younger self cared, I'd have seen early in the war journal the Hard Line were highly praised, but after their patron's land was lost, they were censured by King Merrick directly for brutal treatment of prisoners. Their patron being Harwin Rayleigh, whose latest request to forcibly retrieve his territory had been denied, but those were distant problems and not mine to worry about. I remember the personal journal of Commander Riley was a horrible insight. He boasted of cruelty far beyond the public accounting. He pined for an excuse to attack Orlais, to take back his lost land. It was easy to imagine how clinging to such hatred would poison a man, but I could not know how this stranger's private war would collide with my love for Marjolaine. Marjolaine commanded fear, respect, and high price. She was the Orlesian aristocracy's answer when the next step in a rivalry was to end it, and she was everything I wanted to be. She never spoke of herself, never gave hints of who she was away from the game, but she always seemed to know how to captivate us. She was a mentor, not a leader. She suggested, and others grew wealthy in her shadow. At the time I only casually noted that Marjolaine's satchel held just the bare essentials for travel. It was barren of anything even remotely sentimental. Sketch. I met Sketch in Valrayo, but he had spent so much of his life hiding among immigrants and smugglers, he lacked the connection, resentment, and even accent of other city elves. His primary concern were about persecution as a mage, not an elf. He was not the bardic type, but I suppose the game was more forgiving than the Templars. He remembered his books, but not unexpected for a mage, but most were mere distraction, the thinnest pulp of history. The only proper mage tome was a volume of philosophy and ethics regarding the manipulation of summoned creatures, which he owned because it was large. He was slowly covering every page with little preoccupied scribbles, as though the text wasn't even there. Would be reason to call him Sketch. Tug! Tug. Tug was a dwarf with few words for strangers and choice words for friends. Didn't seem that quiet, but he was a strange fit in Orlais, but he never offered a reason for why he left his home. He had accepted his company and friendship. I had accepted his company and friendship, knowing he would share what he wanted in his good time. He left when I first asked about the silk kerchiefs. We'd be in some noble's vault pocketing gems, and Tug would be rummaging in the linens. They were his practical luxury, because one could never be sure of toiletries when travelling. He once said far too loudly that he'd spoiled himself and his lost callus. But I suspect that may have been for Sketch's blanching reaction. Blanching reaction. Remember a statue of Andraste? There were many, both in Orlais and Ferelden, but I had never held still long enough to see one. The gentle light would have put my younger self to sleep, but the beauty and strength of that figure offered strange comfort. I was too foolish for revelation, but doubt would bring me back, and there would be no shortage of that. Silas Corthwaite was an odd one. He eagerly fell back into the role of soldier. At the time I assumed he wanted revenge. I would come to see that he was trying to be an example that Riley had spoiled. I'm not even sure that Silas realized he was doing it. Eventually I would feel a sad kinship. Marjolaine had offended my profession in a similar way. Silas had been stripped of everything, so he had nothing personal to show his nature, but there was something about the way he looked at the trappings of the chantry, especially the candles. He was a stranger there, like me, but as a Ferelden, he was not so far from home. It was important that everything be just right, not because he believed, but because someone believed. I found that charming. And that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. Do any relevant things with YouTube's buttons, and have a nice day.